Welcome to our podcast. Today we have with us Harry Griffith, Executive Director of Sun Valley Economic Development. We're excited to have you on board today, Harry. How do you feel about being on a podcast?
My first podcast, so I'm pretty stoked.
Good. I think it's all of our first podcasts.
Yeah.
So welcome to our first podcast. We're looking forward to providing you guys with information about the Valley and stories about the Valley. We're really excited to do this.
Telling Sun Valley's story through the voices that are shaping every chapter.
Today we're going to be talking about the FIS World Cup Finals, or maybe known as Stiefel FIS World Cup Finals, coming to town here in Sun Valley. Man, there's been a lot of talk about this. We're really excited about it. Harry, what's your role in it?
So my organization was asked to help the company pull together a couple of issues that relate to economic development. The three areas that we're most actively working in are with regard to trying to help house the cup, finding housing for teams and officials. Secondly, the transportation, think about the transportation logistics and how we sort of move people around the valley. And third, the off-site non-venue specific activities.
Okay.
So those are three areas that we're most involved in.
Wow. Well, today we're going to be talking about the housing portion of all of this. We are MVP Vacation Homes, and we have been working alongside with Harry on trying to find additional housing to what we do. And so it's a big task. I mean, how many people are we looking at bringing on?
So it's interesting. The event is basically the top 25 in the world. It's the final event of the season. And we have a lot of participants in the event. So we have athletes, officials, media, coaches, physios, ski technicians, et cetera, ski racing suppliers. There's about 1,000 people that kind of are in that category of active participants in the event itself. And then in terms of spectators, obviously we'll have all of the locals that hopefully will show up on the hill, but we also expect something in the order of 3,000 to 4,000 spectators coming in from around the country.
So that's like doubling the size of
that triples the size of Ketchum.
Triples.
Basically, yeah. So it's a big event, one of the bigger events that we've ever hosted for sure.
Wow, that's huge. So yeah, we're going to be talking about housing in this one, and I really feel like you guys out there need to know that we need some housing, right? We're tripling the population here. So with the committee coming to town, what are they expecting from us?
So there's a visitation committee coming, mostly with FIS officials, but also include U.S. team members and leadership. They'll be coming here basically to first take a look at the venue, make sure that the venue's ready, that the trail work in terms of tree removal, in terms of safety features, and all of that are in place. Secondarily, they'll be looking at some of the other arrangements in terms of what kind of housing have we got organized, what are your transportation plans, what have you considered in terms of the medical safety requirements that are necessary. Wax rooms are an important part of these events because each participant generally travels with a lot of skis, and they need a lot of space to prep those skis. So they'll be kind of looking at the whole thing, and the hope or expectation is that at the end of the visit, they'll basically give us the final green light to go ahead and get this moving forward.
How much housing are we looking at needing?
So the housing needs I kind of break them down into a couple of different buckets. We have a contractual obligation to provide basically free housing for athletes, either free or reduced price housing for officials, depending on a certain contractual ratio. And then we're also trying to help the media get housing and sponsors as well. So sponsors like Stiefel and Audi and Visa, they're all going to bring a large of clients, guests, participants
Nice.
So we need to make sure that they can also find housing. So, given that our community really only has around 6,000 pillows, and we're going to be 90+% full, we need to make sure that we optimize that housing, but also that we can bring on additional housing for other people that will come in for the event specifically.
So I have a question for you that's kind of outside what we're talking about, and we'll get back into the housing. How were you selected for this position?
I would say that I've been doing this role, economic development, for 15 years. We've worked closely with the resort over that period of time. We've also worked with all the hotel and hospitality groups around town, the restaurants. So I'm in a pretty good position to know most of the players and the owners of the businesses, because it is going to take a community to make this happen. I've also got a little bit of background in ski racing. I used to ski race for Dartmouth and skied on the U.S. team for a couple of years.
Great.
So this is kind of in my blood.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a fun project that I think, again, the more people we can get involved, whether it's my organization or other organizations across the county, the better I think the outcome will be.
Harry's been great. I mean, we've had a couple meetings with him and Spencer and I, and man, Harry, you rattle off these names of these skiers. I'm completely lost. I love skiing. I've skied my entire life, but I have not raced, and I don't follow it like you do. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Can you, from the perspective of someone like myself that has a very shallow understanding of ski racing and these things, can you kind of explain a little bit of the magnitude of what is coming to Sun Valley? And in the past, like, I only know just a little bit of the history of the Stiefel, but I know it's come to Vail. It's come to a couple cities in the U.S. Aspen. Is that right? Pretty recently.
Yeah, the recent races that we've had in the U.S. Last year there was a major World Cup event at Palisades.
Okay.
They also had a World Cup event at Aspen.
Okay.
Those were kind of one-off events in that they were one discipline, male only or female only, and only one or two disciplines. So this event is unusual in that it is basically both men and women, and it is all disciplines. So it's basically it's the downhill, it's the Super GS, it's the giant slalom and the slalom. So again, it's the culmination of the full year set of events. Racers have been on the road for 3 months plus prior to this event.
So what are the dates that we're looking at?
So we're looking at, people are hearing different dates. This is going to be a kind of a 10-day stretch. The athletes will arrive roughly the 18th of March, and they'll depart the 28th of March.
Okay.
The first week is basically what they call Speed Week. So that'll be basically the downhill and the Super G. They'll have 2 days of training in the downhill, and then they'll have a day. The Friday will be the men's and women's downhill, and then the Saturday will be the men's and women's Super G. Then there'll be a slight break, and they'll move into what we call Tech Week. And Tech Week will basically feature the giant slalom races on the Tuesday and the slalom on the Thursday.
So I understand that this is not just a ski race, but it's almost like a party for Sun Valley. There's a lot of things going on outside of just skiing.
Yeah, and I would consider this the Super Bowl of skiing. The Super Bowl takes place every year.
Yeah.
It's a different location. It's a chance to celebrate the season for the NFL and the AFL. So I think it's really akin to that if you're not a ski racing aficionado. But as part of that, obviously there are, in addition to the on-hill activities, there's all sorts of off-hill activities. So we will be activating 3 or 4 different locations across the community. Obviously, the main race base will be in the Warm Springs Village area. That's where the races will start and finish. That's where awards will be given. That's where there will be all of the facilities that you need for spectating, food and beverage. So again, more of a mix of sort of a party atmosphere with some hardcore ski racing. Second location that will be activated will be downtown Ketchum. So there will be basically a festival down there. It's being termed the 5850 Festival. That's the elevation. That'll take place basically over the weekend when the speed races are taking place and finishing, and just before the tech races start the following week. And then a third location that will be activated will be Festival Meadows in Sun Valley. There'll be some events and activities there. And then obviously the resort itself will host a lot of the teams and the activities and many of the officials. So that'll be kind of a fourth location where there'll be a lot of people moving around, a lot of activity taking place.
So you say events and activities. What's that look like?
I think it's everything from music to food to athlete signings of things. The official events that take place around all of these sorts of races are a bib draw. That's a very sort of formal event. That's pretty cool. And then the award ceremonies. The bib draws will take place at the Sun Valley Resort, and the award ceremonies will take place a couple of hours after each race concludes at the base of Warm Springs. But they'll be, again, with athletes throughout town and lots of media. There'll be lots of opportunities. Sponsors will be having host locations. Some of the major sponsors like Audi and Stiefel and Visa and so forth will probably have hospitality venues. So there'll be, again, a mix of different things where people can get involved and actually get close to their heroes and participate in the events.
Sounds great.
So people, even outside of needing housing, locals can still support in those sorts of ways, volunteering for those certain events, and that's what you're kind of.
Yeah, there'll be. I didn't mention volunteers. There is a need for volunteers. So in the last couple of years that we've had the U.S. Nationals, we've had around 250 volunteers. Everything from course maintenance to parking to credentials and accreditation. It's kind of 3x that. We probably need something in the order of 650 volunteers for this event. And the volunteers, again, we're hoping to engage as many local people as we can, but we will need outside volunteers. So if you're a ski racing nut and you sort of want to get involved in the event, but you're back east, there'll be a website where you can sign on and indicate your experience and your interest, and hopefully maybe be given a tap to participate.
That's what I was going to ask. How do they sign up for that?
There's a web page that exists now that's being built out a little bit more so people can put in the relevant experience they have. Because it is important that we get people in the right roles with the right skills, whether it's on hill or off hill.
Yeah. So possibly another need for housing.
Yes, and housing for volunteers. Absolutely. That's part of the mix.
So how is this going to impact the valley here now and in the future? So
I think the one question a lot of people ask is, why Sun Valley? Why are we doing it here? And the company has kind of given its answer. I mean, I think they're looking at filling a hole in the calendar. March is generally pretty slow.
It is, yeah.
Usually at 20-30% occupancy. Secondly, there's the opportunity to, again, attract an increasingly diverse audience. The international audience that we see here, the clientele that we see here, is not that significant in terms of. So this is an opportunity to basically reach out to Europe and get Sun Valley on the map. And I think the third reason is a bit around history. We had a history of hosting international events going all the way back to 1936 when we had the first Harriman Cup. There have been since then 28 Harriman Cups have taken place. The last one was 1977 when Ingemar Stenmark won the slalom and the giant slalom and was awarded that trophy. So we're trying to bring back that history, that legacy, and then that legacy can lead into additional events in the future. So the expectation, I think, would be is if we do a good job as a community, we can be in line for this same event 2 years later in 27 and potentially 2 years beyond that in 29. In between, we would have the opportunity to also host individual events like a men's downhill or a woman's downhill or Super G.
Yeah.
So those are, again, opportunities to help put the area back on the map and go back to our legacy and our sort of true blood of ski racing.
Yeah. So the amount of people that will be watching this on television is
Many millions. So maybe it's not the hottest thing to watch on TV in the U.S., but for Europeans, this is sort of their gold standard. So we'll see 2 to 3 million eyeballs from these events streamed live. The pre-events, the interviews. Again, it's a major production.
So once these people see an event somewhere, they usually want to come ski it, right? At some point in their lives.
All I can say is if you look at the European attendance at these sorts of events, we were at Kitzbühel this winter, basically 50,000 people, 100,000 people at peak show up for these events.
Wow.
We don't have that capacity. In the U.S., they're more on the order of kind of 10 to 15,000. Whether it's sort of Palisades or Killington. So the hope is that, yes, we will start to see some more ski traffic come this way.
So where was the last FIS World Cup finals held?
The last World Cup finals was held in Saalbach, Austria.
Wow.
Not around the corner from Kitzbühel. And that's where they actually tried a slightly different format. They tried a longer format, a 2-week format.
Oh.
And they've scaled that back. They thought that this kind of 10-day format was better for the athletes, better for the sport, a little bit more focused.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah.
So how many people came to that event?
I don't know, but I'm sure it was in
Spencer can look it up. So I'm curious on, okay, let's say 8,000 people came to that event. How do we narrow down to make sure that only 3,000 or 4,000 people come to this one? What's to say that 8,000 people won't show up? Is it based on housing and being able to availability, or how's that work?
Yeah, I mean, I come back to our kind of bed-based traditional hotels, short-term rental. Between those two, we have around 6,000 pillows. Obviously, we're hoping to bring more inventory into the marketplace so that we can house more people. But we will be seeing drive traffic on a regular basis from Salt Lake, from Twin Falls, and from Boise. So that's the unknown, is how many people are going to kind of pop in for the day.
And it's going to be based off if they could get a place to stay or not, right?
A place to stay, a place to park, a friend's bed that they can beg.
Yeah. So the quicker that you book up a place, the better, right?
Yeah, I think that we're seeing a bit of a pause right now until this site visit takes place in September.
Yeah.
But that goes as planned, then we think that people will start actively getting involved with deciding where they're gonna stay for the event.
What'd you find out,
It
Spencer?
said Saalbach had about 10,000 spectators a day.
Wow.
Sounds about right. So the critical thing, I think, is that we have, obviously, I talked about the 1,000 participants. That's kind of the core that we need to take care of in terms of making sure that they get housing, it's appropriate, it's safe, it's proximal to the resort, and it has the right amenities. So for that, the majority of that set, we're committed to trying to get them into the sort of the North Valley area. So anywhere from Hewlett Meadows south to the hospital. They need to have equal proximity to the venue, to be fair. We also, within that set of participants, we have some very large teams, the Swiss, the Austrians. Between athletes and officials, we're looking at somewhere in the order of 60 to 70 people that you need to house. Clearly, we don't have a lot of hotels that can handle that without totally selling out. So the resort will end up providing housing for those larger teams.
So there's 60. There could be up to 60 people in one team with one team.
Swiss team, the Austrian team, the Italian team, based on sort of past performance, are the largest teams. You then have a second tier of teams that are in the order of somewhere between anywhere from 30 to maybe 40 or 50 individuals. Some of those, again, will be housed by the resort, U.S. team, for instance, but we'll also leverage the relationship with hotels like the Limelight, Hotel Tamarack, et cetera, to house some of those middle-sized teams. And then the challenge that we have is the smaller teams. There's a whole big tail end of teams. There's roughly in the order of 25 to 30 teams that will qualify. But we have around 10 to 15 smaller teams where it's maybe one athlete and 4 officials, or one athlete and 9 officials. I mean, we have some individual superstars in the sport who travel with a slightly larger group of people. So we're looking for housing options for them. And if we can find something in terms of a large home in the Warm Springs area, those would be of interest for providing housing for those groups.
So we just noticed in the Olympics, Spencer actually brought it up, right, where they were looking, or where they were using beds that were like cardboard, and so they were just like sliding these beds into a room for these athletes to sleep. We're not doing that here.
That's not going to work. No. The FIS has got some pretty strict rules around what constitutes a bed.
Yeah.
So if you have a king bed, that's not like 2 athletes. That's one person.
Yeah.
When you have a bunk room, you can only count the bottom bunk. Murphy beds are okay. Pull-out couches are not okay. So there's a very strict kind of set of rules about what constitutes a bed.
Is that just for the athletes, or is that
That's for athletes and officials both.
and officials?
Yeah, and officials. So we're looking for, I would say, generally, homes that can accommodate between 4 and 10 people in terms of that bed base, which would probably end up being larger homes. We also would be interested in clusters of homes,
So if there were a number of condominium,
units that had 1 or 2 bedrooms and they were all in the same area, we could patch that together and make that available for one of these smaller teams as well.
Yeah, that just changes the game, right? I mean, that's tough to find that many homes with limited amount of beds. I mean, you can't pack them in like sardines, right? So you have to find a ton of homes out there. So I mean, it really shows how much of a need we're in to find these homes. And so with the athlete and judges and media, the people that are going to be at this event, not the spectator type, but these guys have to be here. We have to find housing for them.
We've kind of reached out to the community. We've identified the need for housing, particularly for smaller groups, smaller teams. And we've had people step forward saying, hey, I have a house. It's available. I'd like to make it available for this group or that group. And that's great. That's part of what we hope would happen as a community, that people would sort of step forward. Some people have stepped forward and volunteered their homes with no strings attached. Others have come forward and said, I'd be interested, but what could I get for it? And we are in the process of collecting information on homes that might be available. We are prepared to provide some incentives to people that would donate their homes. Some of those incentives could be as simple as a bunch of lift tickets, a season's pass, VIP, access to the event or the activities, or it could be more substantial. Ideally, again, as I said, the obligation to FIS is to provide effectively free housing for teams and a certain ratio of officials. So we're looking for people that are basically, I would say, community-minded and want to be part of the event, want to be part of the activity and help support. The idea is to sort of create a critical mass of interested inventory, and then we can try to do some mix and match and try to figure out, okay, if this is a facility that's in Haley, maybe we can put a media group down there.
Okay.
And the media group would pay X or Y. If it's a cluster of condos up in Warm Springs, maybe we can put the Andorran team up there, small team, and make arrangements with the owners so that it works within the FIS contract rules about how much can be paid for those for that facility.
So as a community, not just with housing, I'm sure there's other needs. How can we help? How can we come around this event? And what are the needs out there that we can volunteer our time with?
So we've talked about volunteers in general and specific areas where volunteers are going to be needed. That's obviously, and as a volunteer, you can volunteer for one day, you can volunteer for the whole event. Some volunteers are going to be needed early on. You have to start prepping this course in certainly no later than mid to late February. So there will be roles throughout the whole of the event from a volunteer basis. It's important that we get butts on the stands, so to speak. We're going to be on national, international television, and we want this thing to look like community embraces it. That's one of the things that, one of the reasons I think that we were considered for this event is because of our legacy in ski racing, and the way that the community has embraced athletes and events like this historically. So there'll be all sorts of opportunities to get up on the hill, sit in the stands, to rub shoulders with athletes. So again, we want to sort of show our best face, our best foot forward.
So I imagine like local churches, local companies that could volunteer their employees for certain things. Is there something that a nonprofit companies, local churches, anything like that could step forward before the event to get things ready, not just during the event?
Well, there'll certainly be sponsorship activities or opportunities. These are not inexpensive events to run. So at the end of the day, we're going to need a variety of sponsors ranging from an international level, again, some of the names I mentioned, to the national level, to the Idaho state level. So reaching out to companies, major employers, major companies in Idaho, and also the local level. And I think the local level is more about things like in-kind support, kind of like what you guys are doing in terms of trying to contribute some time, some energy, some effort into making sure that a particular area that needs help, like housing, can be done. But there'll be opportunities for uniforms, for people to get involved in food service. I mean, if you think about this, if you've got 6,000 people and you have 1,200 restaurant seats, and how are you going to feed all these people? Right. So there's, again, a wide variety of opportunities for local people or companies or businesses to get involved.
So we're friends with one of the most popular restaurants here. We're not going to say who it is, because just in case they don't do this, and I won't say he or she, but they. But we're telling them that they need to get a food truck and park it over to Worm Springs somewhere and just do some incredible sandwiches. Selling off of that. And I think that's what we're kind of looking for too. Like some people to come up with creative ideas that would help facilitate all of this in the way of housing, food, and whatever it might be. I mean, it's a big deal.
And we are thinking about food trucks for sure, and there's not enough kind of in the immediate area, so we'll need to bring people in from Boise, potentially Salt Lake City as well.
I know somebody actually that now that you brought that up, that would probably be really good at something like that too.
But it's the event is we haven't touched on it. I do run an economic development agency, but the event is actually good for the community in the sense of it's going to bring money here. It's going to leave money in people's pockets. An event like this, we've done some early projections. We think the 10 days or the set of activities around the 10 days will bring in the order of in excess of $15 million of incremental value to this community. And a lot of that's going to be through spectators, through the housing and the feeding of the spectators, but it's also through things that local businesses will get involved in terms of providing catering services to host sponsors or the car rental agencies. So there's a whole variety of different economic impacts, and a lot of those economic impacts will actually go directly into our pocket through the local options tax. So out of that 15 plus million that we're thinking overall, we're thinking something in the order of $750,000 potentially being incremental LOT, local option tax, which again goes to help support the tourism industry in town and infrastructure to basically make it work.
For Sun Valley, where we are right now, are there ski towns that we look to for that data in the future per se? Like, are we looking at an Aspen? Are we looking at a Park City to see how we're performing as a ski resort town, or how does that work for you?
So we've taken advice, particularly from the most recent U.S. hosts of these kinds of events, because they have more of a real world feel. I mean, our speculation is that we're going to see this many people, and the impacts will be X and Y. So yes, there's been a regular conversation. The Sun Valley Resort, their team that's working on this, have attended most of those recent events, so that when we learned in late January that this was looking likely, they sent teams to all of those events that took place at the end of last year, the Aspen, Palisades. They'll probably send a team to Killington this fall, where it'll be the next U.S. event, early season. And we've also taken advice from other communities that have experienced these events. We've talked to Lake Louise about the event that they ran for 20 years and what they saw in terms of the economy. So it's all part of the learning process that we go through. We've also, the company, the resort, has reached out and actually contracted with individuals, with people that have experience in various aspects. So whether it's the World Cup housing coordinator who's on contract, or the person who has gone after some of these sponsorships for, again, the alpine events that take place in the U.S. Those are things that we're leveraging. The chief of course has 20 years or more experience with the Beaver Creek events, which have been kind of the highlight, I think, of the American hosting of. They did the World Championships, I think, 6 or 8 years ago. So again, we're leveraging that expertise, and we're trying to fine tune it for what it means for us and how things will be a little bit different here, because there isn't a one size fits all cookie cutter approach to this.
Yeah, so we want to thank Harry for coming out today. We have a lot more to talk about in this area. We actually have a special guest coming up for our next podcast that you guys will be interested, that's involved in the ski world. And so we'll have Harry back at some point.
Part
we'll
two.
We'll talk a little bit more about where we're at and where we're headed and what it's looking like. So
Sure. And I'd like to thank MVP for kind of putting their hand up early in the process and volunteering to sort of be a centerpiece, focal point for trying to catalyze some community interest in housing.
Well, thank you for allowing us to be involved, and we're actually very excited about this. We talk about it all the time, so it's something that we're looking forward to, and try not to be stressed out over it. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Harry.
Thank you.
If you are Sun Valley local and would like to rent out your home for the 2025 World Cup, please visit mvpvacationhomes.com. And if you'd like to volunteer no matter where you call home, please visit sunvalley.com/events.